All right, so this one is on the Cave of Machpela. Right, Avraham says when he negotiates with Bnei Het, he says, "Ger v'tashav anochi imachem," that I am a stranger and I'm a resident with you. Right, so after Sarah Mena passed away, right, Avraham Avinu gets busy with arranging the burial of his wife, and it so happens that he wants to bury her in Cave of Machpela that is located in the territory of the people called Hittite, right? And so now he negotiates with them, get in the Cave of Machpela, right? And he says this phrase that I am a stranger and I'm a resident with you, right? So it explains that Abraham, right, was truly a stranger here. At that moment, he wasn't planning to apply for a green card, but the tragedy of losing his wife, right, that made him a resident, right? He lost his better half. Right? She's now going to be buried here in Kiryat Arba in Hebron, right? So now he has no choice but to become a resident of this land. He has to, right, because now this is where his wife is going to be. Furthermore, as we know, Abraham intended to ultimately, when the time comes, to be buried alongside her in Cave of Machpela, right? So if before this he considers himself completely a stranger, even though he had a promise that this land will be his, but that was going to be further into the future, not at the moment, right? But now, having to bury his wife in this land, that changes everything. Now it means that if his wife is here, then he, is going to be connected to that land even already. And if he's planning to be buried there himself, then it creates even a stronger connection. He says, as we know, for the neshama, for the soul, the chief residence location for the neshama is where the body is buried, which is why we give such big importance to Kivrei Tzadikim, to the places where the holy people are buried, because the neshama has connection, right, to that place, and so that tzaddik has connection with that place. That when they come with the kever, you come to the special place on the planet which has connection to that tzaddik, whoever it may be. Avraham Avinu, or Sarah, or like in Cave of Machpela, or Rabbi Meir, or whatever. So, so he is making a request. He says, "Ve'ikverena meiti milifanai," that I want to bury my dad before me. He says to the Hittites, right? He seems to be in a rush. It's almost sounds like I want to get rid of the body. I want to get the body out of my building or whatever, and I want to bury her as soon as possible. So the question is, why is it that he's in such a rush to bury her? In Jewish tradition, and this is where we learn it from, we do try to bury a person as soon as possible. Right? We don't procrastinate. Sometimes, under certain circumstances, we may delay a day or so if we try to let relatives from Israel or something to fly in or whatever, different circumstances. But generally speaking, we try to plan it for as soon as possible. Sometimes maybe we delay because of a certain calendar situation, but generally we want to do it as soon as possible. So he says, why was Abraham in such a rush? Right? Because he says that Abraham knew that if he procrastinated and Sarah's body was just laying there, on the table or whatever, and not be buried yet, said what this would create an opening for negative spirits to take hold of her body. Right? This is something that a very bold thing to say. And he says that if you leave a body around for too long, especially a body of a holy person, it's like two sides of the magnet, right? Positive and the negative attract to each other, right, with strong force. If the positive magnet is very powerful, it's going to attract the negative magnet that much more forcefully, right? If you have a super powerful positive magnet, yeah, and all the negative magnets will rush towards it. So he says naturally all the forces of klipa, of impurity, of negativity, of course they're going to be attracted to something as holy as the body of Sarah Imeinu. Now, when she's alive, then it's a different story, right? Because she has her holy neshama fully present in her body, and it repels all of the negativity. And they know they stand no chance. But now that the neshama, for the most part, had left her body, and her body is still permeated with the kedusha that people like this have, there's this insane attraction. And it says Avraham Avinu did not want to give them time and a chance to do that. So he says also that the local population, the Bnei Chet, right, they also understood that the body of somebody this holy, right, has extreme kedusha, extreme holiness associated with it. And they actually really were excited to have somebody like that buried on their territory. They wanted that to happen too, which is why they were so like supportive, and everybody was like, yes, of course, you know, anybody in our people will be honored to give you, you know, whatever you need to do this on our territory. We're very happy. He says why? Because they understood that if they have somebody like that buried on their territory, right, and they have somebody that holy on their land, it will give a special spiritual merit to this area that will give certain level of protection and blessing to the entire area where this person is buried. And they weren't stupid. They understood that. So he said, naturally, they were like, yeah, of course, sure, bury her here. You know, they wanted her to be here. And they understood that a lot of times, maybe even if they don't deserve certain protection, but just because such a tzaddik is buried there, that will create this protective shield around their area. And, you know, why not? So Abraham, however, did not wish for it to work out this way, right? He wanted her grave to be separate, right? So all this, because at the end of the day, Bnei Chet were not the most righteous people on the planet. Quite the opposite, right? So there were people that, you know, a lot of impurity, a lot of unholy things were going on in Eretz Canaan with people who lived there. And Abraham did not want this evil and impurity to reach Sarah, right? And he wanted her to be like separated. He had no choice but to bury her in this territory, because that's where he knew that Adam and Chava were buried, and he knew of the special properties of the Cave of Machpela and all that stuff. And this is Eretz Israel in the future. So he knew she has to be here, but he wanted a certain level of isolation from the local residents, right? So they offer like, oh, sure, you can just do it for free on any territory you want. Anybody of us will allow you to do it, meaning that we are the owners, and we're just doing you a favor. And he was like, no, I don't want that. That's not how I want it. I want my separate estate that is exclusive. And the reason he wanted that, he explains, is because he wanted to protect her from all the impurity of people that lived in that area and people in the future that were going to live in that area. So we have a principle, right, that Chazal teach us in Pirkei Avos. It says that woe unto the wicked and woe unto his neighbor, right? Meaning that even if a decent person settles in a really bad neighborhood, whether they like it or not, there's a very good chance it's going to rub off on them, right? So Abraham was like, I want a certain separation from my wife. I don't want it to be just another part of Hittite property. I want it to be my property, and I want it to be something that's isolated from all of them. And you know, because I don't want this intermingling. I mean, it's thank you, but I'd rather pay my 400 shekels, whatever that may be, and I want to take it for free. So he insisted, right? He insisted that I appreciate it, thank you, but I'd like to have a separate burial space. I don't want her to be buried in one of the Hittite cemeteries or something like this. This is also where we get the whole concept of Jewish cemetery, of a necessity for it to be separate from everybody else, away from people of Hittites in this case, or any other people in the future. Right? So we know he requests from Avraham, he says, give me this cave that you have at the end of the field. Because Avraham knows the significance of this cave. Right? He knows that this is where Adam and Chava are buried, and he knows it's a very special place, right? But at the same time, he realizes that Ephron and the rest of the population, they have no idea what that cave is. And he does not want them to know, right? Because if they realize how valuable it is, then they may not necessarily agree to his conditions, right? So they probably would have refused to sell it. At best, they would probably say, okay, we'll allow you to do it there, but it's going to be our property. We'll just give you the right to put your coffin or whatever, into that cave, but it's not going to be your cave, right? And he couldn't let that happen, which is why he says he's so careful of not, praising the place. He just says, give me something at the edge of your field. So now he digs deeper and he says, why is it called Machpela? So he says, we see in this word the word kaful. Kaful means double. Machpela literally means a double cave. Right? So simple understanding of this would be that it's like two levels. Right? It's like this or it's like this, right? That's what kafula literally means. So there's something about the idea of this cave that's something doubled up in it. What Avraham realized, that this cave is a gate. It's like a gate to Shemayim, right? It's a special holy place. It is like a gateway to heavens, right? And it says that the souls of tzaddikim, they pass through Machpela on their way to Gan Eden, which is why, by the way, we also read that later in the story of the spies, Caliph, right, goes to Cave of Machpela to have his special prayer and so on, because he knows this is the gate to Shemayim, and the prayers in this place go straight up, right? There's no in between. Like if you daven at Cave of Machpela, it's just like davening at Beis Hamikdash. It's like one of the direct access points to the heaven, right? And Avraham understands this. And so it says that, so what is the double here? Right? He says, it's, if you look at the name of Hashem, Yud K Vav K, right? We have letter Hey 2 times in Hashem's name. Right? So this is what it's hinting to. Like there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu says, open the gates to the righteous nation, keeper of the face may enter, right? And it's using the words sharim, right? Gates in the plural, right? Meaning there are 2 gates, right? The 2 gates that righteous pass through, right? So it says Maaras HaMachpela is the physical manifestation of these 2 gates to Shemayim, where one level is double on top of the other. He says this is the 2 letters Hey in Hashem's name, right? And the letter Hey, even if you look at it, it kind of like reminds you of a door, right? Like if you think about the visual shape of the letter Hey, right? Like when we do mezuzah, like when we read the story of Pesach, right? We say that they took the blood and they smeared the blood on the lintel and on the 2 posts of the door frame, right? The letter Hey is like associated with the door. Letter Dalit also, right? But also letter Hey. So he says, right, this is the 2 letters Hey in Hashem's name, right? This is what Hefula. It's a Hefula. It's a double Hey. This is why it's called Machpela, a double Hey. Or we also say sometimes Ha-Machpela, right? Ha, the first we add Ha, as in English you use the, right? The definite article. right? HaMachpela means HaMachpela when you this is the cave, this special cave, the most special cave on the planet, right? When it's spelled that way, then you can clearly see two letters Hey in the spelling, right? So Ephron, who owned the cave, right, obviously was unaware of the spiritual significance of this, and he never noticed it. Like his entire life, he lived in vicinity of this super holy place, and he had no idea. And everybody else, like the whole nation, passed by it at one point or another, and they had no clue, right? Avraham immediately, like the moment he passed by, he knew what it was, right? Because Avraham has certain spiritual sensitivity that allows you to sense and see spiritual things like this, right? Because obviously, the spiritual light that comes out of Machpelah is not something you simply see with your eyes. You have to have a certain spiritual sophistication, and you have to be in tune with spiritual reality to sense it and to see it, right? So clearly, Abraham was able to do it, and Ephron wasn't, right? And that's another reason why it's fair, because, like, he couldn't appreciate it anyway, or Hittite couldn't appreciate the cave anyway, right? Even if they knew what it was, they would only appreciate it just theoretically. Oh, if Adam and Chava are buried there, yeah, that's cool. No, but it's not really something that they would really. It's like sometimes you have someone who, I don't know, let's say, can appreciate a certain classical music, right? And when they go to certain performance of some, I don't know, violinist who is a world-class violinist or something, and they can go to his concert and they really like, their soul is singing, right? I get to hear, this great violinist. It's like better than anything, right? It's a dream come true. And then maybe they drag a friend with them who is not really appreciative of classical music. And the poor guy sits there miserable for 2 hours, right? And he got him the best seats in the symphony and whatever. And he's like sitting there and looking at his smartwatch, like counting the minutes when it's going to be over. Because he never developed the taste for it, right? He doesn't have the sophistication to appreciate what is happening in front of him. It's like, yeah, it was nice the first 10 minutes, but how much more of this, I can take? There's only so much, right? So what's the point of giving a ticket to the world first-class violinist to someone who's going to come there and be miserable for 2 hours? Give it to someone who can appreciate it, right? Otherwise, it's a waste. Like, it's a waste on that person because they're miserable, and the guy who's performing is playing for someone who doesn't appreciate what he's playing. Like, nobody wins, right? When you have somebody who's truly, somebody who can appreciate it, then everything clicks into place, right? So this is what happened here. Avraham Avinu could appreciate the significance of the Machpelah, and Hashem arranged it that somebody who truly can appreciate this, that's who's going to own this place, because it's a holy, sophisticated spiritual place, and there's no point to keep it in the hands of someone who has zero appreciation for it. But the bottom line, just to conclude, right? This is this idea here is that the reason it's HaMachpela, right? It's a double cave, right? Because it's two letters of Hashem's name, and this is the two gates to Shamayim, right? This is why it's called Machpela, the double cave. It's double in the sense of the letter Hey of the name of Kadosh Baruch Hu is like physically creating these gateways to Shamayim in the physical world here.